Dear Makita friends, I warmly welcome you to this new Makita review. I know you've had to wait a long time, but finally the moment has arrived. I managed to order this device from Makita, and now it's here on the table, the new high-end mid-range impact wrench from Makita. You know what it's about, namely the DTW700. This device is designed for somewhat demanding tasks because, as you can already see, the product box alone is not necessarily small and compact, and undoubtedly connected to that is the actual battery impact wrench. This good piece, the DTW700, is supposed to or can deliver a solid 700 Newton meters of torque, and I would say that today we want to really put it to the test. So let's get started. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to this channel quickly and activate the bell to not miss any more videos. You can find the current prices in the video description. Thank you very, very much for your support, and with that, let's get started after the intro. The Makita Impact Wrench DTW700, actually the perfect cordless impact wrench for those who demand medium to high performance and don't want to hold a too heavy or too large device in their hands. Let's remember, Makita has other well-known devices here, such as the DTW300 or the currently absent DTW1002, which is the largest cordless impact wrench from Makita in the 18-volt format. This means we now have three different torque classes, namely 300, 700, and finally the 1000 Newton meter impact wrench from Makita, where this one was quite a heavyweight. And here we have a nice middle ground which has a lot of power and hopefully is also compact. Essentially, the perfect compromise between maximum power and maneuverability. But how it really works in reality, we'll take a look at that in the test today. These two models should be mentioned, both the 300 and the 1002, and this variant has also recently appeared, namely the TW004, the 40-volt cordless impact wrench. I've already introduced and tested all these devices in detail. If you haven't seen these videos yet, make sure to check them out. I'll link them for you right here on the top right on the info card. But today's video is exclusively about this colleague here, namely the 700, although I must say, a comparison of all these devices is something I'm really eager to do, but that's another matter. So if there's interest in this regard, please feel free to write it down in the comments, and now I would say let's start with the contents of the package. So what do we see here when we take a closer look at the package contents? Clearly, one could probably guess it without looking. Firstly, we have the stack of papers, the user manual, warranty conditions, safety instructions, and interestingly enough, it seems Makita no longer includes a promotional brochure. Next, we see in the product box the nicely dimensioned belt clip for the impact wrench, and of course, lastly, the new DTW700. I would say at first glance, it seems quite compact, but especially when you put it next to the previously introduced 330, you can see that it's not quite as petite as initially thought. And precisely with this point, I would say let's start right away, namely with the size and weight. As one can see from the outside, the DTW700 is definitely not small, but I would say it is still compact because, especially when you think of the 1002, it's definitely bulky in comparison. So here we have a relatively compact device with impressive torque. This means the DTW700 is definitely not the most compact 18-volt cordless impact wrench from Makita in the lineup, because if you want to loosen nuts, you need to consider this overall length. And precisely in numbers, we have a total length from the beginning of the square drive to the end of the device of approximately 170 millimeters, and I would say, for the power class, that's definitely acceptable. And the weight probably looks the same. Let's use the scale here, and the impact wrench and solo weight, meaning without the battery, is already a proud 1900, let's say 2000 grams. Plus, of course, the battery, in this case a 5 ampere-hour one, then we're at approximately 2600 grams. 2000 grams for a 700 Newton meter cordless impact wrench is definitely acceptable. Clearly, as it stands here, it cannot be used, so adding the battery, we're at around 2600 grams. But even this, in my opinion, is still acceptable. Nevertheless, whether one wants to or can work with this Makita impact wrench all day, I have my doubts here. I mean, with the 330, that might not be a problem, but with the DTW700, you might need a little break now and then. Regarding the handling, I must say, in my opinion, the DTW feels quite good. In terms of weight distribution, the device sits really well in the hand. The center of gravity in this case is nicely vertical, meaning the impact wrench doesn't tilt forward or backward. Clearly, in this position, it looks somewhat different due to the large impact mechanism, but overall, it makes a really good impression. This is emphasized by the built-in handle, which we also find in almost every other Makita machine. The handle itself, as you can see, is ergonomically designed, and the impact wrench is easy and comfortable to grip. Additionally, there's a large rubberized area, making the entire device slip-resistant. Also quite evident here, no, the impact wrench is not broken because, just like the larger variant, it features AVT, anti-vibration technology. In this context, the entire impact wrench is not rigidly connected. We have this light coupling at the bottom, so the vibrations generated, which are typical for impact wrenches, are not transferred too strongly to the battery. As we know from past videos, lithium-ion batteries are quite delicate, so this provides an additional layer of protection against vibrations. Otherwise, let's stay down here at the base for a moment. What else is nice to see here? Clearly, on the right and left, there's a small thread for the large belt clip, allowing you to hang the cordless impact wrench when not in use. Furthermore, here at the bottom is the 18-volt battery. I'm often asked, which batteries can I use? It's an 18-volt device, meaning you can only match 18-volt batteries, and for maximum power, I recommend using a larger battery, so 5 ampere-hours are definitely fine. Here at the bottom is the control panel for the DTW700, and this also seems quite familiar to us because we recall the 330. Here we have exactly the same control panel. What does this bring us? Through these two small control panels, I can adjust the impact wrench accordingly. I can select 4 different torque settings or modes and also completely activate or deactivate the LED of the cordless impact wrench. And as mentioned, both are truly identical here. Due to time constraints and of course, as I don't want to bore anyone here, if you want to know how this control panel really works and what you can adjust, I refer you once again to the video of the DTW330. I presented it in detail there. Now, back to the actual DTW700. I believe we left off at the handle, more precisely at the controls at the top. Regardless of this too, one can say that they're actually identical to those on the DTW330. Very, very pleasant, easy to handle, and of course without any hooks or the like, so in terms of handling, it's really top-notch. Regarding the speed and impact rate, we can of course adjust these on the DTW700 in 2 ways. Firstly, through the typical speed regulation here at the index finger, and secondly, through the control panel. Here too, we can pre-adjust the speed roughly. More precisely, we have an idle speed of a solid 2200 revolutions per minute or a maximum of 2700 impacts per minute on the highest setting. All of this is powered by a powerful brushless motor. It sits at the back and is supposed to deliver a solid 700 Newton meters through the square drive to the nuts. Honestly, it sounds quite brutal, but I would say it is, and we'll probably see this in detail in the test later on. While we're right here at the front, I must say there are exactly 2 versions of the DTW700. One is the DTW700 with a retaining ring, half-inch drive, and then the 701, also a half-inch drive, but in this case without a retaining ring, instead with a pen. Otherwise, the differences are really minimal. We have a half-inch square drive with the typical retaining ring. Also, all around, as you can see, a nice thick rubber coating. The object you're working on is protected here as well, in case you accidentally bump the impact wrench against it. And of course, not to forget, a built-in dual LED for illuminating the workspace. Again, nothing special as we find these LEDs in every new Makita device nowadays, but still, it's bright and precisely aimed, quite pleasant. In summary, I would say that the DTW700 certainly makes a very good first impression, perhaps only in theory. Therefore, I would say we now move on to the practical test after a short advertising break to finance the channel. So let's get started on the practical test. And now it gets really interesting. The DTW700 in the extreme test. You can see below the large 5 ampere-hour battery fresh from the charger for maximum power. Let's see what kind of performance we can really achieve today. Also, here are the nice thick impact sockets for the giant nuts. And of course, the electronic torque wrench to loosen the torque must not be missing. But let's start with the loosening torque of the impact wrench as usual. Tightening with a torque wrench, one nut at a time in 100 Newton-meter increments, and then loosened with the impact wrench. Also, it's worth noting that throughout the entire test, we're in the 4th stage, the highest one, 100 Newton-meters. Actually, it's ridiculous as you can see, so this could have been skipped. Let's move on to the next level, 200 Newton-meters. I believe we should get the same result here. Yes, even here, 200 Newton-meters for the cordless impact wrench is no problem. Let's proceed to 300 Newton-meters. It took a bit longer here, but still a piece of cake. Next stage, 400 Newton-meters. Yes, solved very quickly, nothing else to say. Let's move on to the next stage, 500 Newton-meters, halfway to 1000. I think now it should get interesting. You can see here significantly more force is definitely required. Let's see if it can still loosen the nut. Yes, it struggled, but still, it's ridiculous. 500 Newton-meters solved. Let's skip 600, 700 Newton-meters. Oh yes, and here it struggled too, but still, the nut is off. 800 Newton-meters, people. Now it gets really interesting. You can see I almost can't tighten the nut anymore, so the foot came into play, and there was the click. The nut is tight. 800 Newton-meters. Yes, and here it struggled too. Did you see that? It took a few seconds, but the nut came off. 900 Newton-meters, the second to last stage. So tightening is really a struggle here. That's the only way to put it. Yes, there was the click, 900. So it's really insane. There's no other way to describe it. We managed to loosen 900 Newton-meters here. Last stage, according to the torque wrench, 1000 Newton-meters, and as you can see, I'm fully leaning on it. So 80 kilograms over 1 meter is a solid 800 Newton-meters, and it still hasn't clicked. That means the residual torque is definitely needed here, but I can't generate the necessary torque. So we're at around 800 to 1000 Newton-meters here. Will it be able to loosen the nut? Now it gets interesting. Yes, I thought at times it wouldn't manage to loosen the nut, but you saw it. The nut is loosened. The performance is simply brutal. There's no other way to describe the whole thing. And with that, I would say let's move on to the next test, namely the tightening torque of the cordless impact wrench. For this, the nut is tightened for 5 seconds and then loosened with the digital torque wrench. Here we go. And I have to say, at times I was really afraid it would break my fixture and snap the nut. As you can see, unfortunately, I couldn't loosen the nut. It was just too tight. So here's a second attempt, another 5 seconds. And again, the digital torque wrench. I can fully stand on it here as well. I just couldn't loosen the nut. You see it, there's an 8 at the front, so we have 815 Newton-meters, and the nut isn't loosened. I can't use a lever or the like here due to the limited space. Also, here briefly shown again, he could of course loosen his own nut again. That was no problem, but I can't get it off. This means this fixture here is simply too undersized for this performance, for the DTW700. And with that, a conclusion. Honestly, I don't really know what else to say about this. I think the test showed everything. The performance of the DTW700 is simply incredibly brutal, but unfortunately, I can't push it to the limit here anymore. As we have seen, the DTW700 was able to easily loosen the freshly tightened screws with 800 Newton-meters, and that really quickly. Likewise, assessing the tightening torque within 5 seconds to 800 Newton-meters is definitely quite impressive. This, in turn, means that the DTW700 is easily suitable for changing tires, as some have already written to me. If one or another wheel nut is a bit rusted, he should definitely have no problem here as well. For this, of course, he's somewhat larger and bulkier than the DTW300, but I believe that can definitely be accepted. So I hope you liked the video. If yes, please show it with a strong thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any more videos. The current prices can be found as usual in the video description below. Thank you very much for your support, and we'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye.